So what if I told you that we've been thinking about prayer completely backwards? I mean, what if praying for something you really, really want is the very thing that kind of cancels it out? It's a pretty wild idea, I know, but the source we're digging into today presents this exact argument, and it's absolutely fascinating. Let's get into it.
You know how it is. We've all been there, right? You're up for that big promotion at work, the one you've been working towards for ages. And what's our first instinct? To pray for it.
Or, maybe it's something more serious. A health issue pops up, for you or someone you love. It's a scary time. You feel vulnerable, and so you pray for healing, for things to be okay. And of course, when money gets tight, when you're struggling to make ends meet, you might pray for a little help, for some financial relief. It's just a deeply human thing to do, to ask for help when we feel like we're in a tough spot.
Okay, and this is where our source just flips the entire script. It asks us to consider a crazy thought. What if prayer isn't a cosmic request line? What if its purpose has nothing to do with getting things at all? This idea challenges a really fundamental assumption many of us have.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, we have to do a little reorganizing. We need to think about prayer and move it from one mental box to a completely different one. Let's shift it out of the request column and firmly into the ritual column.
We pretty much do this automatically in our lives. We have these two categories of actions, right? On one hand, you've got your worldly stuff, things you do to get a tangible result like success, wealth, or health. And on the other hand, you have acts of worship, things like formal prayer, fasting, or pilgrimage, where the reward is spiritual, not material.
So the big question is, where does our personal prayer, the asking kind, the dua, actually fit? Most of us, if we're being honest, have it sitting squarely in that worldly requests box. But according to the perspective we're exploring today, that's exactly where we're going wrong.
And here is the absolute key, the light bulb moment. Prayer isn't supposed to be a means to an end, it is the end. It's an act of worship in and of itself, just like fasting. Its main benefit, its real fruit, isn't meant for this life. It's for the next. So, what happens when we mess this up? Well, when you treat prayer like some kind of cosmic vending machine, put a prayer in, get your desired item out, you're basically canceling out its spiritual value. You're turning what should be this profound moment of connection into a simple, empty transaction. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting, because this new way of thinking totally changes how we see hardship. If prayer isn't about fixing our problems, then what are problems even for?
Well, think about other specific prayers for a second. When the sun sets, we don't pray to make it come back up, right? Of course not. The sunset is just the signal. It's the universe telling us, hey, it's time for the evening prayer. Same with an eclipse or a drought. The event itself is the trigger, the call to worship.
And that leads us to this incredible line, calamity is the call to prayer. Hardship isn't the problem your prayer is supposed to fix. No, the hardship is the alarm clock. It's the spiritual siren telling you that the time for a very specific kind of prayer has just arrived. So hardship isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's the divine signal, the adhan, letting you know that the time for a particular prayer has begun. So when you're facing a struggle, whether it's with money or your health, that difficulty is the actual signal. You're not praying to make it go away, you're praying because it's there. And to really see what happens when we ignore this principle, our source brings up a really powerful classic cautionary tale, the story of a man named Thalaba. So this guy, Thalaba, was so devout they called him the mosque bird because he was always there praying. But he had this one obsession. He prayed constantly to be rich. People warned him against it, but he wouldn't stop. And wouldn't you know it, his prayer was answered. His flock of sheep multiplied until he was incredibly wealthy. But then, his wealth completely took over his life. He got too busy to go to the mosque, and when the time came to pay the required charity, he refused, calling it just another tax. By chasing a worldly outcome, he lost everything spiritually.
Okay, so this brings us to the biggest question of all. If you're not supposed to pray to get stuff, then what in the world is the point? Seriously, what's the real reward here?
Let's just put these two views side by side. The common view says prayer is about getting your wish. If you get it, it worked. If you don't, it failed. But this other view, it says the point is simply to perform an act of worship. The prayer itself is the reward. The greatest result you can get from praying is the fact that you got to pray. Anything else that happens in the real world, that's just a bonus.
And our source has this fantastic analogy for it. It calls any worldly benefit you get a promotional gift, or eşantiyon in Turkish. So if you pray and you do get that promotion, it's not the payment you earned for your prayer. It's just a free gift, a little bonus given out of mercy, maybe to encourage you to keep going.
But what if you don't get the gift? What if your situation doesn't change? Well, that doesn't mean your prayer was rejected. Not at all. The source says it's actually a sign that God loves to hear your voice, and it's an invitation to keep the conversation going.
And this leads to another beautiful, simple line from the source. Just think about it. One bite of food doesn't stop hunger forever, right? In the same way, one prayer isn't meant to be the end of the conversation. The connection, the relationship itself, that's the whole point.
So when you really think about it, this reframing changes everything. It can turn our moments of deepest anxiety and stress into opportunities for devotion. The next time that alarm clock of hardship goes off in your life, the real question isn't whether you'll get what you want. It's how you're going to answer the call.